Hey guys, tonight we step into a medieval alley choked with smoke and a metallic scent of fear as you trudge into a city drowning in death. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments so we know who's brave enough to watch from the comfort of home. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand at the shattered wooden gate of a once busy port town in 1348, the year the Black Death first crashes onto European shores. A brittle wind rattles the empty shutters, carrying the low moans of those still clinging to life. Every plank underfoot seems to shudder with the weight of lost souls. You tighten the straps of your threadbare surcoat, feeling the coarse will scratch against your ribs, reminding you that luxury, like safety, is as rare here as fresh bread. Cobblestones gleam wet in the erratic light of dying lanterns, their flicker creating shifting shadows that dart like pale specters across the walls. You inhale deeply, and the stench hits you, the sickly mix of rotting flesh, burned herbs, and something acrid you can't quite name. They call it miasma, the bad air blamed for every cough and convulsion. You swallow, tasting copper, and remind yourself that later you'll dab that same iron tang across your patient's forehead, hoping it means something to them. A maggy procession of bodies lurches into view. Townsfolk shamble ahead, hoisting swollen corpses on crude carts, their backs bowed under the grim cargo. One soul drops a limp hand as if waving goodbye. You force a shaky chuckle and mutter that death doesn't have shift changes. Joker one tick. Among the mourners, you catch hints of fringe remedies. A woman clutches a dried toad in her fist like a lucky charm, convinced that her amphibian talisman will ward off the plague's bite. You step forward, remembering that physicians once believed balancing the four humors could cure any ailment. Historians still argue whether that theory did anything more than bleed folks out faster. But here, hope is a rare coin. You'll take any payment these dying walls deign to offer. Still, you pause at a fountain's edge and splash cold water on your face, cutting the rings of decay in the wooden basin. A stray rat scuttles away. You wonder if its fleas are the real villains, or if, maybe, their reputations are overblown. As you mount the corner, a pair of surgeons in black robes passes, their famous bird-like masks swinging with every step. In their beaks lie crushed roses and myrrh, intended to filter out lethal vapors. You try not to picture yourself in one. That grotesque visage would give any child nightmares. Joke number two, Beak Guy isn't exactly a killer Halloween costume. Yet you admire their dedication, twisted though it may seem. You press on in the narrow street where traders once fought cloth and spices. Now, makeshift stones hold nothing but bundles of rags, oddly scented with incense and burnt juniper, the folk remedy for plague assault. A merchant waves you over, offering incense sticks to cleanse the air around you. You accept one with a nod, careful not to laugh as you imagine modern candle companies capitalizing on medieval plague aromatherapy. A growling cough cuts through the stillness, and you pivot to see a young apprentice hunched over, palm pressed to a gangrenous bubo beneath her arm. The swelling glows almost green under the lamplight. You kneel beside her, feeling the uneven stones through your knees. As you draw your crude lancet, a short, rusted knife, your hand trembles. You performed this hundreds of times already today, yet every cut feels like the first. You whisper reassurance, despite knowing the odds are grim. The Black Death is estimated to have claimed one-third of Europe's population between 1347 and 1351. Tomorrow, she might be gone, just another name on a tally you'll bang out by candlelight. Historians still debate whether the plague spread primarily through airborne particles or rat-borne fleas. But for you, it doesn't matter which theory wins. The outcome is the same. You press the blade against her skin and taste iron on your tongue. The bubo splits, oozing blood and dark fluid that lands with a dull thud on the cobbles. A sharp gasp escapes her lips. Your second patient tonight. You grit your teeth and focus on expelling every drop. She squeezes your sleeve, and you offer a lopsided grin. At least it's not tax season. You joke quietly, your voice barely above the last of a breath. Joke number 3. Mortuary humor at its finest. Above you, the moon peers through ragged clouds. Somewhere beyond the next wall, a church bell tolls for the dead. You rise and wipe your blade on an old cloth, noting flecks of crimson. This is your life now. Each death a reminder that even a single day here could be your last. Yet you push forward, drawn by duty, curiosity, and maybe a hint of stubborn pride. Ahead, the city's heart beats with a ragged rhythm of survival against impossible odds. And you, well, you just showed up the shift. You step deeper into the winding alley, the lanterns now sputtering like exhausted breaths as you navigate through curtains of smoke and pungent fumes. The townsfolk have dubbed this invisible killer miasma, convinced that fetid air rising from rotting carcasses and clogged gutters is the hand of doom itself. You grip your cloak tighter, though it offers little against the stench that clings to your nostrils. The aroma of decay, so thick you could almost slice it with your lancet. You probably won't survive this air, you remind yourself with a fatigued grin. At every turn, you pass piles of refuse heaped against crumbling walls, overturned fish barrels, discarded entrails, and the odd chamber pot contents dumped by desperate residents. A shudder ripples down your spine as you remember that the city council once ordered mass bonfires to purify the streets, sending acrid smoke spiraling skyward. The intention was noble, but the result only layered the miasma with choking clouds of burning wood and manure. You coughed, nearly dropping a plague pouch full of aromatic herbs and spices. Lavender, rosemary, even powdered unicorn horn, if you can believe some alchemist claims. Joke number 1. At least you've got a medieval perfume sample going. Peering inside a half-collapsed merchant stall, you glimpse blackened corpses draped in what looks like netting infused with herbs. Whispered rumors say these mesh shrouds were sprayed with cat's urine to ward off the evil air. Quirky but oddly logical in a world where anything might help. You wrinkle your nose, imagining a feline key miasma mask. A stray thought flickers. You train for university lectures on humoral ballads. Yet here you are sniffing raw kitty pee. Historians still argue whether some of these folk remedies did more good than harm. But for now, you silently thank the rats for being too polite to share their fleas. You pause beneath an overhanging beam plastered with skull and crossbones warnings and hastily scrawled mantras. Breath deep and die. One reads, scrawled in charcoal. The cracked sign serves as a grim billboard, declaring that every inhale might be your last. Beaked masked surgeons pass by, their waxed leather garb reflecting the flicker of torches. In their beaks sit bundles of dried flowers, resins, and crushed gems intended to filter the bad air, an innovation inspired by Arabian scholars centuries earlier. You raise an eyebrow, the corners of your mouth twitching upward. Fancy noses indeed. Your own protective measures are far simpler. You tilt your head, closing your eyes, and pressing a small patch of mint and close to your lips. It's a friend's remedy. Place fragrant smells near the nose to ward off miasma. You inhale, as if sipping a medieval mojito, tasting cool sweetness against a backdrop of rot. It's hardly foolproof, but it's better than nothing. You think of that apprentice from last night, her bubo still oozing dark fluid, and wonder if a whiff of peppermint could have saved her. Historians still debate whether these aromatic interventions did anything more than provide psychological comfort. And at this point, you'll take whatever comfort you can get. You round a corner into what was once the bustling marketplace. Now, emptiness yanks at your nose. Stalls stand abandoned, save for one with a grizzled old woman handing out small vials of plague water. a concoction blending water from holy wells, pounded pearls, and a dash of vinegar. She insists that the mixture kills invisible spirits lurking in the air. Fringe scholars claim it worked on a placebo effect strong enough to buoy the spirits of the wary, though no one's quite certain. You pocket a vial out of curiosity, lining it up against the flicker of a candle. It refracts prisms of color like stained glass. Joke number 2. Who knew your bedside table would look so oddly? A sudden gust crowns the alley, whipping up dust, feathers, and the occasional rat tail. You duck as a scrap of parchment flutters past, landing at your feet. Scribbled hastily in red ink are the words, Miasma Feely fails. Underneath, someone has drawn a crude rat, an arrow pointing from its belly to a human silhouette. You stew over this graffiti, a modern mind's call for contagion theory, centuries ahead of its time. Historians still argue whether witnesses observed a true cause but lacked tools to confirm it, or whether superstition blinded them entirely to empirical clues. In any case, you pocket the note. It's proof that not everyone bought the barrier narrative. A boy peeks around the corner, clutching a tattered cloth to his nose. You crouch beside him, offering a fragment of your mint pouch. His wide eyes glint with relief as he breathes in a fresh set. Works wonders, you whisper, pressing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. You feel a pang of guilt. Should you be doling out fragrances when lancets and poultices are what you pay to wield? Then again, even a pinch of hope feels revolutionary here. Ahead, the alley opens into a small plaza dominated by a fountain choked with weeds and algae. Its water turns dark green, and you nearly gag at the thought of drinking from it. You scoop a handful onto your face, splashing it across your cheeks to clear away some of the grime, but mostly to reassure yourself you still have reflexes. The sound of splattering liquid echoes eerily, reminding you of last night's patient still breathing within her straw mat. You count your 3 jokes from last section and vow 3 more tonight. You inhale once more, still bracing against despair. In the dim glow of torches, you can almost see the miasma coalesce into ghostly shapes dancing above the cobblestones. An optical trick, you know, but unsettling all the same. You wonder if, centuries later, someone will wear virtual reality goggles to relive this smellscape, complete with haptic feedback of dripping gore. Joke number 3. Medieval VR, sponsored by your favorite rat-filled alley. As you rise, you sweep your gaze across the plaza's boundaries. In the far corner stands a small apothecary's sign, a mortar in pestle carved and faded white stone. Inside, you know rows of jars hold concoctions of bile, roots, and spider webs, each promising excess mortality relief. You push off the fountain and move toward it, determined to glean any weapon, tangible or imagined, against this invisible foe. The miasma clutches at you, but you refuse to let it define the day. With every step, you imprint your footprints on history's stinking floor and edge closer to the heart of darkness itself. And hey, if you make it through this alley without needing a bath in holy water, that'll win in your book. You step into a cramped courtyard where other physicians assemble their grim toolkit, an arsenal of crude instruments that would make modern med students gasp. Your own kit hangs heavily at your side, a short, blunted lancet, a handful of leeches sealed in a wax pouch, and several small glass vials filled with suspiciously murky liquids. As you unzip the worn leather satchel, the sharp aroma of iron hits you full in the face, and you swear you taste it on your tongue. It's the tearing of blood, of life drained so frequently that you almost expect spiders to weave webs across the blade. You probably won't survive this shift, especially if you nick an artery by accident. Across the courtyard, another doctor hefts a ponderous book of Galenic texts, its pages splashed with ink and what looks disturbingly like dried bile. You lean over to peer at the margin notes, quaint sketches of horseshoe crabs and suggestions to use a mixture of crushed beetles and onion juice for infected wounds. Fringe alchemists claimed that beetle paste was a secret weapon against infection, though most patients ended up smelling like a damn garden bed. You wrinkle your nose and joke, hope they grew flowers in the ward, managing to hide a shudder at the memory of that stench rising like a hellish mist. Before you can arrange your tools, a clamorous shout rises from the gate, fresh victims arriving. You lash the bag shut, fingering the tide, not as if it might unravel the moment you draw breaths. You remember the apprentice's bubo from last night, a grotesque lump the size of an apple under her arm, reminding you why this gruesome case demands every tool you can muster. Historians still argue whether repeated bloodletting genuinely reduced fever or simply hastened the patient's weakness. But here, desperation outweighs caution. You're about to find out for yourselves. You extract a lancet, turning it over in your gloved fingers. The edge is worn from countless uses, and a thin film of rust clings stubbornly to the metal. It's nothing like the sterilized scalpels you've seen described in later centuries. This one is a relic that's probably cut through more rotting tissue than any gallant knight has battled foes. You press the tip carefully against your thumbnail, testing its sharpness. It clicks faintly, then draws a thin line of crimson. A rush of adrenaline charges through you. Blood's presence is both familiar and unsettling here. Nearby, someone squirms as a colleague prepares a leech. The creature looks like it was plucked from a gloomy pod, its mottled gray body writhing hungrily. Leeches were all the rage among medieval healers. Drop one on a patient's arm and let it feast until it fell off, full of impure blood. Quirky fact, some physicians even kept leeches in ornate ceramic jars, hoping to add a touch of elegance to the macabre practice. You can't help but smirk at the idea of a fancy leech terrarium on a vanity table. Joke number one. Hey look, it's Mr. Secretary. You tuck the leeches away and reach for the next instrument, a blunt spoon-like tool used for scraping sores. The handle is splintered, and you went recalling how a colleague once lost a chunk of his thumb to its jagged end. You shepherd your own fingers around it more carefully, recalling that minor cut could invite infection worse than the plague itself. Historians still debate whether these scrapings did any medical good or simply spread pathogens further, but for now, every action feels weighted with risk. Your attention turns to a small glass vial labeled diatragicant elixir, filled with a milky suspension of gum tragacanth and honey. You throw it up to catch the light, watching briny beads shift inside like drifting clouds. Local apothecaries swear this brew soothes inflammation, though the taste reportedly resembles fermented wood pulp. You twist off the cork stopper and inhale, sweet with a rising twinge of mustiness. Joke number two. Who needs wine when you got gum soup? A sudden clatter from the gate interrupts your reverie. You stash the vial back in a designated spot and load one last vial into your belt pouch, a greenish fluid rumored to be distilled from viper's blood. This venom tincture was a fringe remedy. Some said it prompted the body's defenses to rally against the plague toxins. You catch yourself wondering if it's snake oil in the literal sense, and decide you'll test it on a rat later, if you survive. Historians still argue whether any of these bizarre mixtures did more than terrify bacteria into retreat, but in truth, you're too busy to care about theoretical musings. Your tools all in place, you stand and survey the courtyard. A dusty wall bears a faded inscription. Without tools, hope is blind. You snort at the romanticism. Here, your tools feel more like flawed companions, each with its own secret agenda to betray you at the worst moment. You adjust the lantern hanging above, its wavering flame casting long shadows across your workspace. In its glow, every scratch on your instrument gleams like a warning. You lean against a barrel, tracing a fingertip over the lancet's edge. You think of modern surgeons and their pristine scrubs, marveling at the contrast. They don't have to wear their tools as a second skin, bonded by necessity and fear. You recall that pigeon excrement was once used as an antiseptic, quirky but undeniably gross. That tidbit sticks with you, making you grateful for any miracle wash, even a foul-smelling pigeon guano paste. Down in the courtyard's corner, an assistant unfurls a linen cloth onto a makeshift table. The rough fabric is stained with previous procedures, dark rings and splatters forming an abstract tapestry of past wars. You nod at the assistant to pass you a pot of heated water. The vessel looks charred from repeated flame exposure. You dip the lancet briefly in the scalding liquid, half believing you're disinfecting it, and half wondering if you're just cooking a rust. Historians still debate whether medieval sterilization rituals had any real impact or mostly offered peace of mind. But you value peace of mind like a priceless treasure here. A distant bell tolls for the hour. You take a deep breath, acknowledging that time here exists only to remind you of limits on life, on safety, on how many lies you can say before you become just another body to haul. You strap the satchel tight and step toward the courtyard gate, your heart pounding like a war drum in your chest. With each stride, the tools at your waist jingle softly, a metallic cadence that feels like a funeral march. Outside, the street is quiet, too quiet. You lift the lantern higher, its pale light revealing the entrance to the next house of suffering. The door creaks open under your hand, and a rancid breath of fever and fear washes over you. You glance down at your lancet, the edge glittering ominously. You wonder if the blade trembles as much as your hand. And then, just as you steel yourself to enter, you pause. You realize that these aren't just tools. They're extensions of your very will to fight back against oblivion. Each instrument, from the blunt spoon to the live leech, embodies centuries of hope, hubris, and sheer stubbornness. You breathe deeply, steeling your mind. If you can master these flawed instruments, maybe you can cheat death for just one more patient. You push the door open fully and step inside, your tools gleaming in the lantern's glow. The courtyard fades behind you, and the next chapter of horrors begins. One prick, one scrape, one leech at a time. You find yourself at the heavy oak doors of the pest house, the so-called shelter that's anything but. The hinges groan under the weight of countless bodies, and the wood itself is stained a dark, pleading red. You grip your lantern tighter, its warm glow flickering across the coiled release of saints meant to protect the dying. But here, faith feels like a flimsy blanket against the storm of death. You probably won't survive this threshold, but duty pulls you onward. A gaggle of villagers hesitates outside, faces gaunt and haunted. Their arms strain as they lift the stiff form of old Marta, her cheeks sunken, her breath rattling like gravel in a jar. They shove her forward like a sack of potatoes, and Marta's feet scrape the dirt, sending out tiny puffs that smell of stale earth and despair. You inhale sharply. Remember that miasma? You can practically taste the heel, sour and unrelenting. Still, you focus on the task. You're here to catalog the newly arrived, to measure the scale of loss. Inside, the air is thick with whispered sobs and a low moan of pain. Wooden benches line the nave, and bodies slouch like fallen puppets, dressed in the same satin shrouds. Above you, rafters drip condensation lit by a lantern, casting shadows that dance like tortured spirits. You step over a pool of dark liquid, blood or bile, you can't tell, which glistens slick on the flagstones. You flex your fingers, recalling the lancet's weight at your side. Joke number one. At least you won't get a paper cut here. By law, every soul who enters the pest house must be recorded in the register. A massive ledger bound in pigskin and stamped with the town seal. You slip it from your satchel, its spine creaking like the hinge you just passed. Each entry requires a name, age, and symptom list. Fever, swollen lymph nodes, purple blotches across the groin and armpits. Mainstream fact, the plague's bubonic form typically caused these painful buboes, often followed by fever so high it could cook you from the inside, although toad-in-hand remedies claimed otherwise. You flip to a fresh page and dip your quill in ink that's seen better days. It's watery, more likely to drip than cold paper. You'll still call it ink. It's ink in medieval vernacular. A young man in ragged clothes shuffles forward. His eyes are glassy, and his cheek bulges with a bubo the size of an apple. His hand trembles as he rings a small bell tied around his wrist, a makeshift signal so visitors know he's contagious. You lean down, noting the swollen gland's exact diameter, 9 centimeters. Historians still argue whether recording measurements ever improved outcomes or simply offered bureaucratic consolation. But here, where chaos reigns, water feels like medicine of its own kind. You stand and announce his arrival. The clerk nods, scratching hieroglyph-like symbols into the margin next to his name. You offer the young man a small piece of stale bread, the crust so hard you worry it might break a tooth. Joke number 2, diet plan, medieval crunch. He grimaces but accepts it, hopeful for any nourishment. Behind him, Marty's daughter steps forward, clutching a rag that once was a mother's apron. She begged for a chance to see Marty's face one last time. You swallow and remind her gently that such visits are forbidden. The air inside is said to snuff out life on contact. You reach out, tracing a fingertip over the girl's knuckles. Fringe tidbit. Some folk believe that staring directly into a plague victim's eyes will trap the illness in your soul. So most caretakers adopted veils or masks to avoid the curse of sight. You offer a soft smile, though your own voice shakes. Better to remember her by life than a deathbed. The girl nods, tears slipping down like molten gems. As you continue through the hall, the pest house structure itself grows. Planks shift beneath your boots, revealing gaps that you imagine the rats exploit, slipping through to feed on the fallen. Rat-free revelations aside, you remind yourself that plague-infected rodents were the true culprits, though the villagers never tired of blaming the air. Historians still debate whether the pest house overcrowding accelerated the contagion or served as a grim quarantine that saved lives in the long run. Here, though, every new admission feels like a crack widening in a dam held together by hope and stale straw. Your lantern's beam catches a row of small alcoves carved in the stone walls, each holding a limp body swathed in cloths. You count 15 already, and more keep coming. You crane your neck to see if the alcove labeled C is truly empty. No, you missed one. Joke number 3. Even the dead can't secure a spot. You jolt as the clerk directs you onward, reminding you there's no resting place for the living here. Ahead, a sickly sweet smell tickles your nostrils. You trace it to a basket of herbs perched on a stone ledge. Hyssop, wormwood, and a sprig of fennel, chosen for their supposed ability to ward off death's breaths. You recall dabbing fennel behind your ear back in the streets. Now it seems laughable, like wearing a paper crown to fend off arrows. Still, every ragged bouquet of herbs feels like a defiant gesture, a human heart's insistence that we can bloom even in rot. You pause by a squat stove where embers glow dull red. Villagers toss in wooden beams salvaged from the worst-infested homes, hoping the fire will purify their loved ones' spirits. The heat presses against your skin, and you step closer, feeling sweat bead your hairline. Under your cloak, you feel the weight of the registry book in your ever-present plague pouch. You know you'll need both before you leave. At the far end of the hall, you hear a strangled cry. A widow leans over her husband's pallet, pressing her lips to his ear. He's too weak to respond, but she whispers prayers you can't catch, Latin invocations mixed with pleas that the saints return him to her arms. Tears slip from her eyes like droplets of hope escaping in the night. You catch her gaze and nod, offering a look that says you understand more than words ever could. A shuffling sound alerts you to fresh arrivals. 2 boys stumble in, eyes wild, dragging a basket that rattles with unseen movement. You step aside, bracing as they set it on a stone ledge. The basket lid rattles again. Inside, dozens of rat carcasses, their spines arching in death's dance. The boys claim these rats fell from the ceilings of nearby homes, packed so tight it was impossible to pass. They brought them here as proof of the rat-flea connection, an empirical tidbit that most still scoff at. Fringe scholars have whispered that these gatherings of dead rats reveal the true nature of the plague's vectors, but the Crown's miasma theory holds power in official circles. Historians still argue whether anecdotal findings ever swayed policy or if entrenched beliefs blinded authorities to evidence. You simply arch an eyebrow and march forward, rat bones crunching underfoot. You pause at the gate to catch your breath. Outside, the rasping wind tugs at the gate's iron bars, as if desperate to shut you in forever. You press a hand to your chest, feeling the ledges bulk through your tunic. This place, these cobbles, this damp air, each element conspires to crush your spirit. Yet you gather yourselves, recalling your 3 jokes, and step past the threshold once more, ready to face another wave of grief and grime. With one last look at the procession of shadows behind you, you push the heavy door closed. Its echo reverberates like a death knell, and for a heartbeat, you're alone in the oppressive hush. Then, the world outside beckons, another street, another home, another soul in need. You straighten your back, adjust your cloak, and move on. After all, someone has to count the stories when life itself seems too short. You step away from the pest house, iron-bound gloom, and into a narrow lane where the stench of smoke from cleansing fires fights the miasma's grip. In your mind, you recite the 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, like a mantra because balancing them is supposed to keep you alive. You probably won't survive this next round of bedside hematending, but at least you've got a centuries-old recipe book in your head. Remember that lancet? It's only one of your many tools to adjust the body's liquid temperament. A thin mist glows in torchlight as you enter a cramped chamber where 3 patients lie on straw mattresses. They're breathing rattles. Once people believed phlegm floating the lungs caused such sounds, not fleas or plague bacilli. You crouch beside the first, an elderly baker whose skin looks oddly waxen. You place a warm cloth on his forehead, dripping with a concoction of rosewater and spun wool meant to draw off excess phlegm. Mainstream fact: Hippocrates introduced the theory of the 4 humors around 400 BCE, a paradigm that dominated medicine until well into the Renaissance. You press the cloth down gently. Try not to flinch at the faint squelch as it meets his clammy brow. Across the room, a nurse brings in a shallow basin of blood. Your next batch of leeches went missing, so you're improvising. You grimace, but necessity is king here. Fringe tidbit: some practitioners warmed the blood with hot stones and called it reviving broth, convinced that transfusing a little vitality could jolt patients back from the brink. You roll your eyes, thinking, if only you could patent that, you'd be richer than the Duke of Lancaster. Joke number 1: medieval blood smoothie. Anyone? You dip a strip of linen into the basin, drawing a small pool of dark fluid, and slather it across the baker's arms. You murmur a blessing you barely remember from your seminary days, hoping it inoculates him against both plague and blasphemy. The cloth clings, heavy as a soaked rag, and you lift it after what feels like an eternity, spotting faint pink rings where the blood supposedly pulled toxins outward. The baker coughs, his chest rattling like a wheezing barrel. You pat his shoulder and whisper, better than a cough syrup dance. Joke number 2: you momentarily forget you're speaking to someone who might not last the hour. Meanwhile, the second patient, a wiry young woman, struggles to sit up. You recognize her from the marketplace, clutching that rat skeletal graffiti in your pocket. She groans, and you assess her pallor. Too much yellow bile, you decide, since her skin has a jaundiced sheen. You produce an anti-choleric decoction of wormwood and vinegar, instructing her to sip slowly. Historians still argue whether such bitter tonics did any more than purge the gut indiscriminately. But in your world, A good purge is better than none at all. She tastes it and makes a face like she swallowed a boot. You grin. Worst tea party ever. Joke number 3. The last patient is a child, maybe 8 winters old, cheeks hollow and eyes sunken. His parents begged you for a balanced treatment, neither too bloody nor too herbal. So you mix a poultice of mashed lily bulbs and powdered clams, an obscure remedy you read about in a parchment margin. Fringe scholars still debate whether lilies' astringent properties calm inflammation or simply keep rodents away from curious sores. You smear the paste on his swollen bubble, marveling at how its sticky texture might just repel flies and possibly platitudes. You stick the child's hand with a small sponge, telling him it's like painting his arm. He sniffs, then giggles when it feels cold. Relief flickers across his face, however temporary. Between patients, you administer open-air bloodletting for yourselves, just 30 cubic centimeters. Nothing dramatic. You've learned the hard way that draining too much leaves you woozy, especially after a night in the pest house. You carve a tiny nick on your forearm, watching crimson beads well up. As iron warms your sleeve, you hum a tune you picked up from a traveling lute player. You feel odd relief at your own spleen's deflation, as though expelling a bit of shared suffering. Historians still argue whether self-bleeding protected doctors from contagion or spread disease further, which has much ritual as remedy. Above the low moans, conversations rise in hushed tones. One patient argues that crocodile dung sunscreen cured her grandmother of plague sores, a fringe remedy so bizarre you nearly drop your quill. You suppress a laugh, recalling that dung was prized for its alkaline properties but rarely applied on purpose unless you fancied smelling like a riverbank after monsoon. You remind yourself to stick to honey and onion, which at least won't invite inquisitive insects. With treatments done, you lean back against the wall and count your jokes. You've managed 3, check. You survey your handiwork, balanced humors, if only temporarily, and a few hopeful smiles and a world-grown grin. You tuck the ledger under your arm and rise, each movement reminding you that your own equilibrium is just as tenuous. The corridor outside calls. A fresh wave of victims waits beyond the threshold. As you step back into the corridor's dim glow, you can almost feel the humors in your own body shifting, blood warming, phlegm chilling, bowels settling. You adjust your satchel of instruments, resolve stealing your shoulders. The next room beckons, another chance to balance life's delicate equation, and maybe, just maybe, to cheat the Black Death for one more breath. You walk on, confident in your humoral dance, but wary of the unseen disease pirouetting in the shadows. You follow the narrow corridor's flickering torchlight to a small alcove where the air humidly clings to your skin, carrying the faint tang of vinegar from yesterday's poultices. Your gaze settles on a stout wooden table smeared with dark stains, old blood, pressed herbs, and crusted beetle shells. Here, in this cramped corner of the plague ward, you'll perform one of your more inventive treatments. You probably won't survive this next concoction, but at least you'll have a memorable send-off. A nurse waits beside the table, holding the latest victim, a burly Cooper whose forearm blossoms with an angry bubo the size of an orange. His face is ashen, his voice a ragged whisper when he greets you. You crouch to his level, noting with professional detachment how the swelling dulls the color of his skin to an eerie gray. Mainstream fact: medieval physicians often believed that opening and draining buboes could ease pressure and fever, though it carried a high risk of secondary infection. You draw a breath, bracing yourself for what comes next. You reach for a shallow bowl containing a dark paste, your special recipe of crushed scare beetles, onion juice, and a spoonful of honey for binding. Fringe alchemists insisted that beetle paste, with its acrid aroma and presumed life force properties, could repel the plague spirit. You raise an eyebrow, recalling the time you smeared a similar mix on a farmer's hamstring and ended up with a swarm of tiny beetle legs stuck to your glove. Joke number 1. Who knew you'd meet beetle bits in a bedroom? The Cooper shifts impatiently, so you set aside your memories and pick up your wooden spatula. You whisper a quick prayer, half out of habit, half hoping for divine intervention. Then spread a generous layer of the paste onto a linen cloth. The paste's putrid odor hits you instantly. Sour, earthy, with a faint suggestion of decay. You press the cloth to the swelling, wincing as it sinks into the tender flesh. The patient groans, and you tap the cloth gently to ensure full coverage. At least it's not lotion, you murmur, offering a lopsided grin. The nurse applies a light bandage over the poultice, and you stand, brushing beetle dust from your fingertips. You lean back, folding your arms, and observe the Cooper's reaction. He clenches his jaw, but after a moment, his labored breathing seems to ease. Whether from the pace effect or the simple act of being tended, you can't say. Historians still argue whether such topical applications truly penetrated the skin's surface or merely provided psychological relief. But here, faith and smell are enough to buoy the soul. You nod to the nurse and move on, leaving the Cooper to the dubious comfort of his beetle-infused poultice. A frail woman emerges from a curtained bed nearby, clutching a rat-skin pouch tied around her neck. She claims the paste cured her nephew of plague sores, though her nephew died of what the town records list as unknown wasting sickness. Fringe whispers suggest that this patient's testimony proves the power of suggestion stronger than any herb, yet official physicians scoff at such anecdotes. You offer her a sympathetic nod, noting her wild hope more potent than the honey in your beetle mix. You continue down the corridor to the next case, a tattooed fisherman whose foot is riddled with painful buboes. He looks at your paste with wary suspicion. You lift the linen cloth, darkened by his body's secretions, and consider whether to reapply or switch tactics. You decide on a second application, layering fresh beetle mash atop the old. As you press it into place, the beady fragments of crushed shell crunch beneath the cloth, sending a jolt through your gloved hand. Joke number 2. Crunchy treatment. Low in carbs. The fisherman jolts in surprise, but steadies himself. You step back and give him a thumbs up, the universal gesture even here at the end of the world. He returns the gesture with a weak grin that barely registers among the lines carved by pain. You whisper encouragement. Consider yourself armored in beetle shell. He snorts, a sound caught between laughter and cough, and you move on. At the corridor's curve, a young child peers through tattered drapes, her eyes wide with curiosity and fear. Beside her, a battered wooden chest displays your toolbox. Glass vials, rusty forceps, a chalice of boiling water. You beckon her forward and show her the beetle poultice's colorful layers, hoping to turn her dread into fascination. Fringe fact, some wandering performers claimed they could animate beetles to dance on open wounds, a grotesque spectacle said to amuse dying patients. You stifle a chuckle and swipe a crumb of honey from the paste, demonstrating its sweetness before the stench overwhelms her senses. She giggles nervously. Small victories matter here. Further along, the word walls are scrawled with advice in a million handwritings. Try Pope's blessing. Urine therapy works. Anoint with melted wax. You pause at a cluster of notes, praising beetle pastes, each scribbled testament offering hope. You press a finger to the nearest inscription. Beetles bite back. You shake your head, ridding your mind of the imagined tickle of beetle legs. Historians still debate whether these marginalia reveal genuine grassroots experiments or desperate scribbles from minds unhinged by fear, but you see them as breadcrumbs leading to better care, however unlikely. You return to the table and clean your spatula in a basin of cool water. The liquid turns a murky brown, flecked with honey and beetle fragments. You lean forward, splashing your face in the bowl, part ritual, part attempt to wash away the day's residue. The cold water jerks your senses awake, and you realize how parched you become. You reach for a chipped clay cup of sour, ale resting nearby and take a slow sip. The bitterness coats your tongue, a reminder of all you've swallowed today, grief, odors, and the unsettling thought that you might be next. As you set the cup aside, the bell tolls from the town's chapel, marking midday. You pause, measuring your momentum against the hour. You've treated 5 patients so far, each with a swelling begging for relief. Ahead lies another chamber, where box-strip beds await your ministrations. You rise, dusting beetle flour from your robes, and march on. At the end of the hall, a pair of novice apothecaries greet you with fresh ingredients: powdered rose petals, pulverized nutshells, and a small jar labeled dragon's bone. You snatch the dragon's bone jar and tuck it into your pouch, because why not? In this battlefield of beliefs, every fringe remedy deserves a shot. You nod to the novices and move toward the next bubo, confident that whatever concoction you apply will at least give someone a fleeting reprieve. Before passing through the final doorway, you pause and glance back at the spilled beetle paste on the wooden table, dark, crusted, almost crystalline in places. You imagine future physicians uncovering your concoctions under archaeological layers, marveling at your audacity. Historians still argue whether medieval medicine's more unorthodox experiments were folly or the seeds of modern pharmacology. But here in the thick of it, each paste, poultice, and potion is a testament to human resilience. You breathe deeply, knowing that every ritual, no matter how strange, is a stand against oblivion. You step through the door, beetle fragments clinging to your gloves, ready to face the next swelling flesh crying out for your peculiar brand of care. You slip into a high-ceilinged chamber where the town's medical council has convened to weigh in on the latest plague cures. The long wooden table groans under the weight of fat volumes bound in vellum and stacks of parchment bristling with ink. Flickering torchlight throws the shadows tall and twisted across stone walls. You probably won't survive these debates, but here, words can be just as deadly as buboes. You sink into a creaking chair, paper crackling beneath you, and steel yourself for the council's verdict. At the head of the table sits Master Aldebrand, his silver-streaked beard dripping ink blots from his most recent notes. To his right, Dr. Felix the Younger puffs on a clay pipe, filled not with tobacco. It's half a century before Columbus, but with powdered mandrake root, rumored to calm nerves. Across from him, Sister Evangeline's habit is edged with a faint scent of frankincense. She argues for spiritual remedies over all else. Mainstream fact: by 1350, many European cities had established medical councils to regulate plague treatments, though their effectiveness varied widely. You watch as Aldebrand clears his throat, ready to dispense judgment. Felix stands first. He slaps a parchment onto the table, its edges curled. On it, he sketched a crude diagram showing how forcing cockerels to fight inside a sealed chamber with plague victims supposedly draws out noxious spirits. He gestures grandly. Gentle folk, if the vitality of these birds can purge the miasma from the air, might it not also extract the pestilence from our patients? Fringe scholars whisper that this cockfight cure was practiced in remote hamlets, though no record shows it improves survival. Unless you count bird flu as a bonus disaster. You stifle a laugh and think, I wonder if feather removal was included in the contract. Joke number 1. Foul play indeed. Master Aldebrand narrows his eyes and taps a quill against his ledger. Felix, your theory is as sound as a sieve. He intones, voice rich with sarcasm. Encouraging foul combat among the infected is akin to inviting wolves into the sheepfold to expel the wolves. The council murmurs in agreement, but Felix fires back, citing an obscure Italian physician who claimed cockfight smoke purified the air in Siena's plague ward. Historians still argue whether these anecdotal reports were genuine observations or tall tales spun to curry favor with patrons. You got a mental note to file Siena's smoky coop under unlikely success stories. Sister Evangeline leans forward, clutching her rosary. We must not underestimate the power of prayer, she intones, voice echoing in the hush. I propose nightly vigils at the cathedral, with clergy anointing each patient with holy water. The saint's intercession is the greatest remedy. Fringe fact: some convents did run spiritual hospitals, believing the plague was divine punishment and only repentance could heal. You catch a whiff of a frankincense and resist the urge to sniff a healthy lung. Your sanity depends on it. Historians still debate whether mass prayers reduce mortality or simply offer emotional solace to the terrified. Here, comfort can feel as vital as any poultice. Dr. Matthew, a gaunt man with hollow eyes, clears his throat and lays out his own theory, feeding patients small doses of arsenic-laced bread to provoke violent purging of toxins. While dangerous, he says with unsettling calm, this might reset the body's equilibrium. You feel a twinge in your stomach. Imagine arsenic bread at your next morning meal. Joke number 2. Breakfast of champions or corpses. He sought an Alexandrian text calling arsenic the king of cleansing salts. Historians still argue whether such extreme measures ever saved more lives than they claimed, but Matthew's proposal underscores how desperation warps judgment. Aldebrand lifts a hand for order. He scans the group with tired eyes. Counselors, our duty is to recommend treatments that do the least harm. He glances at you, as if to remind you that every voice matters, especially one who scratches buboes by lantern light. You clear your throat and speak out, your voice steady despite your pounding heart. Might we consider focusing on sanitation, cleaning streets, removing refuse, and airing wards widely? The fewer breeding grounds for vermin, the fewer vectors for the disease. The room shifts. No one expected a working physician's input over lofty theories. Felix snorts. Sanitation, you say? A man can't cockfight and sweep latrines at the same time. Laughter ripples through the chamber. You mask your annoyance with a polite nod. Perhaps not, you concede, but a clean street is a foul-free street. Joke number 3. Sanitation beats cockroaches, I suppose. An assistant murmurs a report. Mortality rates plummet in districts where latrines are cleaned daily and refuse courts run twice a week. He slides a small parchment across the table, tallying death counts before and after improved waste removal. Aldebrand examines it, brow furrowing. Could an analysis of these numbers guide our policy? He asks. Historians still argue whether medieval record-keeping was precise enough to inform public health measures, but the data here seem clear. Cleaner streets correlate with fewer deaths. He watches Felix's cockfight diagram is quietly slid aside. A hush settles. Sister Evangeline closes her eyes, murmuring a prayer of thanks. Matthew folds his arms, still scowling at the sanitation report. Aldebrand leans back, quill at lip, and then nods. Very well. We shall issue a decree. Increase street cleaning, mandate refuse removal, and restrict cockfights within city boundaries. All other remedies remain optional. The council clocks this modest verdict as if it were the cure for the plague itself. You exhale, feeling the weight of the room shift. The council's decision to prioritize sanitation over bizarre cures is hardly heroic. It's common sense you'd expect from a baker. But here, common sense is revolutionary. You tuck the decree into your satchel, confident that sweeping out garbage could indeed chase away more than dust. Historians still debate whether these early public health ordinances formed the bedrock of modern sanitation. But today, you hope they saved at least one life. As you rise, Felix catches your eye and offers a half smile. Not bad, he admits. Maybe clean air needs clean streets, after all. You nod, thinking about the mat droppings that once clogged every drain. Behind you, the counselors begin to disperse, some muttering about returning to more thrilling remedies, others clutching hastily scribbled notes on street sweeping schedules. You gather your tools, your ledger, and a newly minted decree. The torchlight dances one last time across the flip-down shutters of the heavy doors. Its glow a promise that, even amid despair, small victories flicker. As you depart, you can almost hear the sweep of brooms, the clatter of carts, and the hope that, by chasing away filth, you might just chase away the plague itself. And with that, you step out of the chamber, ready to trade philosophical battles for physical labor. Because if there's one cure you trust, it's elbow grease. You slip into the early morning haze, lantern in hand, and notice the carts clattering down the lane are no longer heaped with straw or wood, but with peculiar grade bundles. Black carcasses caught mid-twaddle, their tails coiled in death's final dance. You probably won't survive this hunt for the plague's hidden puppeteer, but you steel yourself. Today, you chase the elusive vectors that turn every flea into a loaded crossbow aimed at human flesh. You skirt around a nearest car, its driver whistling an off-key tune. He takes his cap and weighs a rat by its tail, offering it for your inspection. The carcass's fur is matted, eyes sunken. You hold it by the scruff and examine the puncture wounds near its neck. Mainstream fact: the bacterium Yersinia pestis, though unknown in your time, really lurked in flea stomachs before slipping in our rodent bloodstreams. Rats were unwitting plague amplifiers. You press a finger to the puncture sites, grimacing as a faint odor of decay wafts upward. Near your boots, a stray flea leaps, tiny silhouette against the cobblestones. You lean down, trapping it beneath a glass vial. This gruesome memento might fetch praise among natural philosophers, though they'd never handle it this close. Fringe enthusiasts whisper of dissecting fleas alive to watch them bleed black fluid on glass slides. You cough and quit. Modern science sounded a party I'd skipped. Joke number one: who needs microscopes when you've got medieval intuition? Nearby, a group of apprentices gathers around a fresh heap of rats dumped to the street's end. Their teacher, a gaunt man in patched robes, lectures them on natural history. You wield a pointer carved from bone, poking at a rat's belly. Notice the flea clusters here, he intones. These parasites feast on carrion before leaping to human hosts. Quirky practice. Some innovators tried smearing rat carcasses with honey to lure fleas into traps, though fleas sometimes preferred to flee altogether, leaving the traps mocking empty. You grin at the mental of sticky streets crawling with angry fleas. You pause to record the demonstration in your ledger, though the clerk who insists on neat entries earlier would faint at this mess. You note the date today, the location, St. Albert's Lane, and the specimen count: 8 rats, 14 fleas, and 1 scrawny cat chasing shadows. Historians still argue whether rat populations peaked before human outbreaks or if human behavior, in hoarding grain and stacking refuse, boosted rodent numbers first, but your eyes tell you the streets brim with vermin's footprints. A sudden squeak draws your gaze to a sewer grate. You yank the iron bar and peer into the foul abyss. Rivers of black water coil below, likely a rat highway leading deep under the city. Sneezing, you toss in a small sack of quicklime, hoping its caustic bite will corrode pestilence along with pipes. You've heard that quicklime can slake the thirst of vermin and dissolve flesh, though you're not inclined to verify either claim firsthand. Fringe rumor holds that a lime-lined sewer could burn away the plague's ready fire. Historians still debate whether quicklime disinfection did more harm than good by driving rats in our homes. But here, desperation trumps caution. As you wrench the grate back into place, a woman's shriek pierces the air. You sprint toward the noise and find a child crying over a mound of rats on a family's doorstep. The girl's apron is soaked in tears. The rat's teeth glint like malevolent stars. You drop to your knees, sweeping them aside with a willow branch you found nearby. Underneath, you discover a cluster of live fleas scurrying away. You trap several under your lantern's glass and whisper to the child. Lesson 1. Fleas don't wait for invitations. Joke number 2. Some hosts are worse than unwelcome dinner guests. You cradle the girl's sobbing shoulders and point to the lat remains. These poor beasts died in the gutters long before their fleas abandoned them. You peel a small vial from your belt, gin-infused laurel oil, meant to repel insects, and dab it on the child's sleeves. The tingling scent seems to calm her, though she rubs her eyes with grimy hairs. Fringe theories suggest rubbing noble oils on clothing could create a scented barrier against vectors, though skeptics insist it merely perfumes the wearer. Historians still argue whether such aromatic defenses reduced plague transmission or simply enhanced one's mood amid misery. Straightening, you march onward, lantern swinging. Each cobblestone echoes with your resolve to track these carriers. Up ahead, a butcher's stall stands open, its hooks dripping with meat, yet rats swarm the carcasses, unbothered by any human presence. You produce a scrap of sinew and tie it between two boards, fashioning a simple rat trap. You bait it with scraps of pork rind and step back. You'll check it later. If you're lucky, you'll gather more data instead of extra work. Joke number 3. Tonight's dinner guest has a tail. Moving on, you reach the edge of town where granaries stand like watchtowers. The wind scatters chaff across the yard, and you spot half a dozen rats darting among the sacks. You set another trap, this time with a shallow bowl of stale beer. The liquid's sweetness draws the rodents, though some prefer the comfort of grain dust. You catalog these experiments, convinced that a record of rat behavior could guide future containment efforts. Before departing, you crush one of the trapped rats beneath your boot, grim, but necessary to study the fleas clinging to its fur. You trap the dislodged fleas under your lantern's glass once more, noting their size and color under the wavering light. As you seal the vial, you consider bottling your flea catalog for eager scholars. Fringe collectors might pay handsomely for preserved plague vectors, assuming they survive handling them. You end your patrol at the city wall, where rats' shrieks mingle with morning bells. You empty your vial's contents into a sealed box, stamped with the city's seal for later examination. The wall stones feel cold beneath your fingertips, a reminder of the line between safety and ruin. You secure your findings in your satchel, resolute that understanding the rat's role could tilt the balance. You lift your lantern high, casting its beam across rooftops and alleys. In that glow, you glimpse scurrying figures weaving through shadows, rats on a pilgrimage of death. You inhale sharply, taste iron and vinegar on your tongue, and press forward. This hunt for vector truth feels like chasing winds, but for every flea you trap, every rat you tally, you inch closer to resting an edge against the plague's invisible siege. And though you know one day might suffice to break your spirit, today your mission is clear. Unveil the rat flea revelations and chase their secrets into the light. You find yourself at the heavy oak doors of the pest house, the so-called shelter that's anything but. The hinges groan under the weight of countless bodies, and the wood itself is stained a dark, pleading red. You grip your lantern tighter, its warm glow flickering across the cold reliefs of saints meant to protect the dying. But here, faith feels like a flimsy blanket against the storm of death. You probably won't survive this threshold, but duty pulls you onward. A gaggle of villagers hesitates outside, faces gaunt and haunted. Their arms strain as they lift the stiff form of old Marta, her cheeks sunken, her breath rattling like gravel in a jar. They shove her forward like a sack of potatoes, and Marta's feet scrape the dirt, sending out tiny puffs that smell of stale earth and despair. You inhale sharply. Remember that miasma? You can practically taste the heel, sour and unrelenting. Still, you focus on the task. You're here to catalog the newly arrived, to measure the scale of loss. Inside, the air is thick with whispered sobs and a low moan of pain. Wooden benches line the nave, and bodies slouch like fallen puppets, dressed in the same satin shrouds. Above you, rafters drip condensation lit by a lantern, casting shadows that dance like tortured spirits. You step over a pool of dark liquid, blood or bile, you can't tell, which glistens slick on the flagstones. You flex your fingers, recalling the lancet's weight at your side. Joke number one. At least you won't get a paper cut here. By law, every soul who enters the pest house must be recorded in the register. A massive ledger bound in pigskin and stamped with the town seal. You slip it from your satchel, its spine creaking like the hinge you just passed. Each entry requires a name, age, and symptom list. Fever, swollen lymph nodes, purple blotches across the groin and armpits. Mainstream fact, the plague's bubonic form typically caused these painful buboes, often followed by fever so high it could cook you from the inside, although toad-in-hand remedies claimed otherwise. You flip to a fresh page and dip your quill in ink that's seen better days. It's watery, more likely to drip than coat paper. You'll still call it ink. It's ink in medieval vernacular. A young man in ragged clothes shuffles forward. His eyes are glassy, and his cheek bulges with a bubo the size of an apple. His hand trembles as he rings a small bell tied around his wrist, a makeshift signal so visitors know he's contagious. You lean down, noting the swollen gland's exact diameter, 9 centimeters. Historians still argue whether recording measurements ever improved outcomes or simply offered bureaucratic consolation. But here, where chaos reigns, water feels like medicine of its own kind. You stand and announce his arrival. The clerk nods, scratching hieroglyph-like symbols into the margin next to his name. You offer the young man a small piece of stale bread, the crust so hard you worry it might break a tooth. Joke number two, diet plan, medieval crunch. He grimaces but accepts it, fruitful for any nourishment. Behind him, Marty's daughter steps forward, clutching a rag that once was a mother's apron. She begged for a chance to see Marty's face one last time. You swallow and remind her gently that such visits are forbidden. The air inside is said to snuff out life on contact. You reach out, tracing a fingertip over the girl's knuckles. Fringe tidbit. Some folk believe that staring directly into a plague victim's eyes will trap the illness in your soul. So most caretakers adopted veils or masks to avoid the curse of sight. You offer a soft smile, though your own voice shakes. Better to remember her by life than a deathbed. The girl nods, tears slipping down like molten gems. As you continue through the hall, the pest house structure itself grows. Planks shift beneath your boots, revealing gaps that you imagine the rats exploit, slipping through to feed on the fallen. Rat-free revelations aside, you remind yourself that plague-infected rodents were the true culprits, though the villagers never tired of blaming the air. Historians still debate whether the pest house overcrowding accelerated the contagion or served as a grim quarantine that saved lives in the long run. Here, though, every new admission feels like a crack widening in a dam held together by hope and stale straw. Your lantern's beam catches a row of small alcoves carved in the stone walls, each holding a limp body swathed in cloths. You count 15 already, and more keep coming. You crane your neck to see if the alcove labeled C is truly empty. No, you missed one. Joke number 3. Even the dead can't secure a spot. You jolt as the clerk directs you onward, reminding you there's no resting place for the living here. Ahead, a sickly sweet smell tickles your nostrils. You trace it to a basket of herbs perched on a stone ledge. Hyssop, wormwood, and a sprig of fennel, chosen for their supposed ability to ward off death's breaths. You recall dabbing fennel behind your ear back in the streets. Now it seems laughable, like wearing a paper crown to fend off arrows. Still, every ragged bouquet of herbs feels like a defiant gesture, a human heart's insistence that we can bloom even in rot. You pause by a squat stove where embers glow dull red. Villagers toss in wooden beams salvaged from the worst-infested homes, hoping the fire will purify their loved ones' spirits. The heat presses against your skin, and you step closer, feeling sweat bead your hairline. Under your cloak, you feel the weight of the registry book in your ever-present plate pouch. You know you'll need both before you leave. At the far end of the hall, you hear a strangled cry. A widow leans over her husband's pallet, pressing her lips to his ear. He's too weak to respond, but she whispers prayers you can't catch, Latin invocations mixed with pleas that the saints return him to her arms. Tears slip from her eyes like droplets of hope escaping in the night. You catch her gaze and nod, offering a look that says you understand more than words ever could. A shuffling sound alerts you to fresh arrivals. Two boys stumble in, eyes wild, dragging a basket that rattles with unseen movement. You step aside, bracing as they set it on a stone ledge. The basket lid rattles again. Inside, dozens of rat carcasses, their spines arching in death's dance. The boys claim these rats fell from the ceilings of nearby homes, packed so tight it was impossible to pass. They brought them here as proof of the rat-flea connection, an empirical tidbit that most still scoff at. Fringe scholars have whispered that these gatherings of dead rats reveal the true nature of the plague's vectors, but the Crown's miasma theory holds power in official circles. Historians still argue whether anecdotal findings ever swayed policy or if entrenched beliefs blinded authorities to evidence. You simply arch an eyebrow and march forward, rat bones crunching underfoot. You pause at the gate to catch your breath. Outside, the rasping wind tugs at the gate's iron bars, as if desperate to shut you in forever. You press a hand to your chest, feeling the ledges bulk through your tunic. This place, these cobbles, this damp air, each element conspires to crush your spirit. Yet you gather yourselves, recalling your 3 jokes, and step past the threshold once more, ready to face another wave of grief and grime. With one last look at the procession of shadows behind you, you push the heavy door closed. Its echo reverberates like a death knell, and for a heartbeat, you're alone in the oppressive hush. Then, the world outside beckons, another street, another home, another soul in need. You straighten your back, adjust your cloak, and move on. After all, someone has to count the stories when life itself seems too short. You step through a narrow corridor, lantern light quivering against cold stone walls, and find yourself before a heavy curtain of stained linen. Beyond it lies the dissection chamber, a place where the living study death to save lives, or at least try. You probably won't survive the shock of your first anatomy lesson, but curiosity draws you onward like a moth to a flicker. Drawing aside the curtain, you enter a long, tomb-like room, torches guttering along the walls and smoke curling toward the vaulted ceiling. The air is thick with the acrid tang of burning pitch and the unmistakable scent of old flesh. At the center stands a wooden table, its surface stained black and red like a barbaric altar. Upon it lies a cadaver, swathed in linen until now, an unclaimed body exhumed by university orderlies from a pauper's grave. Mainstream fact: by the early 14th century, leading medical schools in Bologna and Paris had begun performing public dissections on such bodies, marking the slow shift from purely book-based study to hands-on anatomy. You swallow, remembering that you once memorized Galen's theories straight from dusty manuscripts. Today, those theories meet cold steel and cold flesh. A professor in a voluminous robe stands at the table's head, cool tucked behind his ear. He beckons you forward. Step closer, he commands, voice measured. Fringe rumor holds that some dissections were conducted at night, clandestinely, so that curious townsfolk wouldn't panic at the sight of naked limbs under torchlight. You edge near, heart pounding, as he peels back the linen robe in long, deliberate strokes. Beneath, pale flesh gleams in the flicker, like candle wax, soft and yielding. You hear a hushed gasp from a novice at your side. The professor presses one finger into the corpse's abdominal wall, eliciting a soft pop of gas escaping from bloated intestines. He nods and begins to slice along the midline. exposing muscles that ripple like frozen waves. A thin plume of steam rises, carrying a metallic odor that reminds you of bloodied armor in a siege. You lean in, bracing yourself to confront anatomy at its rawest, your mind racing between fascination and revulsion. He lifts a folded parchment, drawing a crude anatomical diagram. Observe the peritoneum, he intones, slicing carefully so as not to puncture viscera. You watch the sheet of membrane peel away, revealing intestines curled like pale serpents. You trace the coils with your gaze, marveling at their perfect, knotted complexity. Joke number one. If only my stomach knew it was this photogenic. A ripple of nervous laughter passes through the gathered students. A student hands you a small knife, its blade long and slender, designed for incision rather than butchery. You take it, blade trembling, and make a shallow cut along the cadaver's forearm, following the path of the great vein you studied in leather-bound tomes. You feel the tip sink in a flesh soft, yielding, and utterly indifferent. Mainstream fact. Dissections like these began challenging Galen's long-held assertions, which are often based on animal rather than human anatomy. As you slice, you notice the muscle fibers diverge from Galen's description, appearing more layered than he claimed. Historians still debate whether medieval anatomists recognized such discrepancies or simply glossed them over in deference to Galenic authority. You move on to probing the ribcage. The professor hands you a small mallet and chisel, tools more akin to sculptors than healers. You position the chisel beneath the rib and tap gently, cracking bone with a hollow snap. The rib lifts away, and you peer into the cavity, greeted by the murky stain of aged blood and vestiges of long tissue. Fringe practitioners whispered of sound field diagnostics, tapping chest to discern fluid pockets, methods that, though crude, occasionally revealed pleurisy. You tap again, listening to the echo. It resonates like wind through a hollow tree. Joke number two. Guess the body's auditioning for a drum solo. The professor nods approvingly, tracing a forefinger across the exposed lung. Note the lobes, he says, lifting a section to reveal its spongy texture. You reach out, fingertips brushing the organ's surface, its jiggling movement under your touch feels oddly alive. He muses that lung inflammation might explain why so many victims turned black, though without knowing plague bacteria, it remains speculative. Historians still argue whether such early observations truly advanced medical knowledge or if the cadavers served more as demonstration props for roleplay. A wind gusts through an open window, stirring the smoky haze. You cough and brush dust from your sleeve, feeling the chill on your neck. Ahead, a small group debates whether the heart's spirits arose from its chambers or from the liver's secreted warmth. The professor lifts the rib cage's sternum piece and motions for silence. Let us examine this beating part. Its structure dictates life. You lean closer as he slices through fibrous tissue to expose the heart's ventricles. The chamber shriveled yet unmistakable in form. Armed with a slender prod, you slip it into the right ventricle, feeling the heart and remains clench around it like a fist. Mainstream fact, medieval scholars still held that the liver produced blood, sending it to the heart for distribution, long before William Harvey's circulation theory in the 17th century. You marvel at the heart's resilience and wonder how often its function went misunderstood, held in the grip of outdated doctrine. Fringe anatomists speculated that dissecting the heart structure might one day unlock cures for fevers, though such promises seemed as distant as miracles. The professor steps back, quill poised over a blank parchment. Record your observations, he instructs. You crouch on a small stool, scraping charcoal across parchment, sketching muscle striations and cavernous cavities. Each line you draw binds empirical knowledge to medieval beliefs, a fragile thread weaving new understanding. Historians still debate whether these early anatomical sketches were widely disseminated or kept hidden in monastic libraries. But in this chamber, they're the seeds of future science. You rise and step toward the cadaver's skull, propping it upright. A Gothic toothless grin greets you. You produce a bone saw, a fearsome curve of steel, and position it at the nape. As you draw the saw back and forth, the bone yields with a gritty rasp. Joke number 3. This must be what cranial DJing feels like. The top of the skull cracks open, and you lift the calvarium, revealing the brain's pale folds. The sight stuns you. Convolutions like river valleys frozen in stone, defying definitions found in texts. For a moment, silence falls, students catch their breath, and even the torches seem to dim and all. The professor beckons you to peer inside. You lean over, peering into the moist interior. Fringe speculation once suggested the brain was little more than a sponge to absorb spirits, hardly a seed of thought. Yet here, you hold the proof that complexity resides where minds reside. Historians still argue whether medieval dissections truly influenced popular medical practice or remained academic curiosities, but you feel conviction seed itself in your mind. Anatomy matters. As the session draws to a close, the professor gestures for the cloth to be replaced. Torches flicker as novices re-wrap the body, draping it gently in white linen. You step back, heart hammering from the visceral encounter. The chamber's hush returns, broken only by distant church bells striking the hour. You tuck your sketches into your satchel. Lanterns glow, illuminating smudged lines and scrawled notes. You pause at the curtained entrance, lingering in the doorway. The world beyond feels different now. Bones no longer secrets, but pathways to understanding. You taste iron and pitch in your mouths, recalling the dip of scalpels and the rasp of bone. You collect your lantern, shoulders squared against the cold corridor. Each step away from the dissection chamber feels like leaving a confession booth, bearing truths both enlightening and unsettling. Yet you walk on, determined that your hands, once instruments of fear, will become tools of discovery. You emerge from the dissection chamber's hush into the bustling open courtyard, where coins clink against your satchel as you collect payment from recent patients. Because even in plague's shadow, death demands settlement. You probably won't survive this endless cycle of suffering and compensation, but for now, you steel yourself to manage both scalpel and tally. You approach a small wooden booth where a clerk counts coppers by lantern light. Doctor, he greets, voice weary. 3 payments, a chicken, 2 pence, and a vial of vinegar. Mainstream fact, medieval physicians often accepted payment in kind, chickens, eggs, even grain, when coin was scarce, reflecting a barter economy entwined with medical practice. You nod, weighing each offering, mindful of butcher's stench mingling with miasma on the breeze. The clerk hands you the chicken by its legs, still clucking weakly. You glance at its dull eyes and imagine it beside the veal you'll roast tonight, if dinner is even on the menu. Joke number 1. At least tonight's soup has some life to it. You tuck the chicken into a woven sack, patting it gently, as if apologizing in advance for its fate. Next comes a patient, a grizzled tanner, slapping down 2 copper pence on a booze counter. His hands are scarred, stained with tannin and a life's work of bending hides. He grunts, "A fair price for not bleeding me out too much, yeah?" You offer a tired smile, secure the coins in a leather pouch, and murmur, "Tumultuous times call for small gestures." Fringe tidbit. In some towns, physicians adjusted fees based on the color of blood drawn, charging more for darker, plague-tinged extracts. An odd cosmetic fee for Doom's palate. Finally, a young woman steps forward, handing you a slender vial of vinegar steeped with rue and rosemary. She explains it for her father's dressing, meant to sting the disease away. You sniff the liquid. It bites your nose with pungent sharpness. Historians still argue whether vinegar's acidity had any antiseptic effect, but its scent suddenly stood in for clean linen. You pocket the vial, grateful for each tool in your arsenal. With payment secured, you lift your satchel, feeling its weight settle across your shoulders. The courtyard stone plinth gleams wet from a sudden drizzle, and you exhale clouds of breath into the cool night air. You consider the moral ledger, balancing price against life, practice against compassion. Here, exchange is both livelihood and lifeline. You spot a butcher at his stall, lamb swinging to ward off rats, carving meat for both living and dead. He weighs you over, offering scraps of tripe for broth. You accept a handful, thanking him quietly. Tripe broth will stretch your meal further than a chicken might. You slip the meat into a pot at your side, already planning a soup to warm your bones after the night's vigil. As you step away, the clerk calls, "Doctor, watch your step." You glance out to see the ground slick with muddied straw and spilled coins. One copper glints at your foot like a fallen star. You pick it up, feeling its cool metal, and tuck it into your pocket, an unexpected bonus in plays accounting. Joke number 2. Extra saving for a cloth that stops bleeding. A rat scuttles by, snatching its straw, and you raise your lantern, its glow chasing the creature into shadow. You shake your head, adjusting your satchel straps, knowing you'll need to check your tools again, cleanse the lancet, replenish your leeches, test that vinegar. Fringe note: some physicians distill their own vinegar tinctures to guarantee potency, though most simply bought what the apothecary offered. You consider stopping by the apothecary on your way home, but decide the vinegar in your pocket will suffice for tonight. Ahead, the gate to the city walls looms. Beyond it, the road to home, or at least your lodgings, winds through deserted fields. You tighten your cloak against the rain's chill and step toward the archway, heart heavy with both survival and sacrifice. The city's lamps flicker behind you, casting long fingers of light that reach for your retreating form. Before you pass under the arch, you pause. In your pocket, the chicken squawks softly, the coins clink, and the vinegar's sharp scent lingers. You inhale, tasting iron and promise. Historians still debate whether medical practices, economics influence treatment quality, but tonight, every body feels like a bond between healer and healed. You lift your lantern high, turning one last glance to the courtyard where life and death danced in equal measure. You walk on, chicken and tail, ready to convert tonight's toil into tomorrow's lessons, and maybe you're still hardy enough to chase away nightmares, even if only for a moment. You step off the muddy road and back into the city's worn of alleys, carrying your lantern like a lone star guiding you home. But before you reach your lodgings, you're diverted by commotion outside a half-timbered house draped in cloth banners printed with crosses. Flickering lanterns reveal villagers clustered around the door, whispering fervently as they hang garlic parades, wooden crosses, and bits of iron above every threshold. You probably won't survive embracing folk magic over medicine, but curiosity and a touch of professional pride pulls you closer. A spry old woman with a headscarf thicker than the town crier's drum leans out, brandishing a string of garlic cloves like a rosary. "Blessed bolts protect against plague spirits," she hisses, pressing a single clove into the hand of a trembling mother. Mainstream fact: medieval Europeans commonly used garlic both as food and purported medicine, believing its pungent odor could ward off evil and disease. You inhale the garlic's sharp tang. It stings your nostrils like a sneeze waiting to happen. Joke number 1. I thought vampires were the only ones who feared garlic breaths. Beyond her, a blacksmith's apprentice hammers tiny iron horseshoes onto a length of twine. He explains that iron, forged by fire and sweat, repels malefic forces. Fringe lore holds that iron charms could pin malevolent spirits to the earth, preventing them from fluttering into human bodies. You watch him tighten a nail through a horseshoe, imagining the rusted metal dripping with supernatural potency. Historians still debate whether such charms offered real protection or simply comforted frightened minds. But here, the charm makers are as bustling as any apothecary. You clear your throat and step forward, boots clacking against cobblestones. A group of villagers parts to reveal a feverish man sprawled on a straw mat, sweat-soaked and delirious. Above him dangles a cluster of garlic and a small silver cross tied with red thread. You crouch beside him, scanning his forehead sheen and the ragged rise of his chest. He needs cooling poultices, not superstition. You murmur, gloves brushing the garlic's papery skins. The mother glances at you, eyes wide with hope that the bulb will pull the illness out through its thatch. You can't blame her. Hope is a precious remedy when lancets and poultices fall short. You lift a heavy clove, its skin cracked and splintered, and sniff it. The garlic's aroma feels like a battering ram against a miasma stench, but you wonder if it'll do more than mask rot odors. Fringe anecdote. Some peasant healers insisted that cooking garlic in wine and offering a sip to patients cured headaches and plague light, the vinegar remedy might outshine that vintage. You tuck the clove into your satchel. Why not experiment? And press a cooling cloth to the man's brow instead, wet with rose water and hyssop. He sighs, eyelids flickering, a brief reprieve, you hope. Suddenly, a lanky teenager strides up carrying a wooden cross carved from the yew tree in the churchyard. He slaps it above the window and beams. Crosses drive away demons, he declares. Mainstream fact. Christian symbols were widely displayed during plague years, as many believed the disease represented divine punishment or demonic assault. You tip your lantern to him, careful not to spill wax. If that cross glows, let me know. Joke number 2. And I'll sell miracle wicks at half price. He blinks, uncertain whether to laugh or clutch his crucifix tighter. A silver-haired priest emerges, fanning incense through the air with a brass thurible. He intones Latin prayers, swirling smoke around the afflicted like a protective cloak. Fringe tidbit. Some clergy carried relics, tiny bone fragments of saints, believing the mere proximity could heal the plague's wounds. You watch the thurible's chains rattle overhead, each cloud of smoke tangling with the garlic's perfume. Historians still argue whether ecclesiastical interventions reduced mortality or merely distracted the sick from despair. But here, the scents mingle into a potent brew of faith. You kneel beside the feverish man again and note the cluster of garlic cloves pressed into a strip of linen at his neck. You can't help but think of modern repellent sprays. Maybe these bulbs work the same way. You gingerly remove one clove and hold it near his nostrils. His nostrils flare, and he takes a deep breath, relaxing for heartbeat. You replace the clove gently, then bind a lavender sprig to the linen next to it. Let's give him a bouquet upgrade. You whisper, joke number 3, 2 for 1, plague defense. You glance around as villagers murmur approval. The mother clasps her hands, gratitude shining in her tear-streaked face. You slip away, satchel heavier with garlic and lavender, your mind swirling with possibilities. If garlic can coax a moment's peace, perhaps combining it with herbal science could yield more. You note the window's placement in your ledger, today's experiment site. House of order, cross by the shutter, garlic by the door. As you move down the street, crosses and charms multiply. Horseshoes, rabbit's feet, worn prayer beads, even scraps of wolf fur. You pass a door draped in red cloth embroidered with runes, a holdover from pre-Christian folk magic that no priest would sanction. You pause, eyeing the symbols. Fringe scholars suggest these runic patterns originated from Norse settlers, their lines believed to trap disease like a net. You trace a finger along the embroidery's curve, marveling at its symmetry. Historians still debate whether such imported charms influenced later European magical practices or remained isolated curiosities. But here, they crowd every threshold like silent sentinels. Ahead, a weaver hangs a cat's head in a glass jar filled with vinegar above her sick husband's bed. She swears the preserved feline wards off vermin and plague light. You avert your eyes. Folk magic can be grotesque, but you note it down. House of Winderland, cat vial above window. You swallow a sigh. Your medical sensibilities clash with that desperation, yet you can't deny their conviction. You round a corner and discover a small shrine beneath an elm tree. Candles ring a painted icon of Saint Sebastian, arrows piercing his side. Villagers kneel, praying for his intercession against plague arrows. You smile, remembering Sebastian's status as the plague's patron saint. Mainstream fact: Saint Sebastian was invoked during epidemics as a protector against contagious diseases, often depicted with arrow wounds symbolizing affliction. You toss a copper coin into a tin lined with wax, devotional offering, perhaps to curry divine favor. Your lantern's flame wavers as a gust rattles the elm's branches. You taste garlic and incense on the air, a cocktail of hope and odor that both invigorates and repels you. You tighten your cloak and realize that folk magic, no matter how unscientific, serves as a communal balm, binding people together against a shared terror. Historians still argue whether these rituals slowed contagion or simply sustained morale, but tonight, a steady heart and willing mind matter as much as any cure. You move on, senses ablaze with garlic's bite and incense's sweetness, determined to integrate the charms you can test into your repertoire. After all, medicine and magic share roots in human desire to control the uncontrollable. As you weigh a garlic blade against your lancet and ledger, you wonder which holds more power, the science you wield or the faith they cling to. And with that thought, you tuck your lantern close and press forward through the charm-laden streets, intent on melding folklore and medicine against a foe neither can defeat alone. You step into your tiny quarters, a single hearth, a rickety cot, and shelves bowed under the weight of battered tomes and empty vials, and close the door behind you with a tired push. The latch grates like a wounded bird, sealing you away from the city's clamorous, plague-lit streets. You probably won't survive the crushing solitude of this self-imposed quarantine, but tonight you wrestle with your own demons more than any bubo. The fire crackles on the hearth, casting jittery shadows across your cramped room. You sniff the air, still tinged with garlic and juniper from your rounds, and set down your satchel with a thud that echoes in the stillness. On the rough-hewn table, your tools sit in a row, the lancet gleaming in the firelight, leeches writhing in a glass jar, and your battered flask of vinegar. You glare at them as if they're part of the conspiracy, each reminder of the night's toil. Mainstream fact: physicians often quarantine themselves for days after treating plague patients, both to protect families and to study the disease's progression in safety. You remove your boots and wince at the sore arch in your foot, a souvenir from stepping over live rats. Remember? You flop onto the cot, the straw mattress sighing beneath you. The quilt is threadbare, tangled with stray hairs and insect shells that crackle under your weight. Fringe rumor holds that some doctors hooked a handful of fleas under their blankets to inoculate themselves with mild infections, hoping to build immunity, though most ended up better than or worse. You pull the quilt over your shoulders, shivering not from cold, but from the memory of fleas leaping in dark alleys. Joke number 1. Nothing says self-care like a live pet nest. Your eyes settle on a cheap porcelain mug of chamomile, tea cooling on the table. You reach for it, the steam carrying faint notes of honey and lavender. You attempt at soothing the mind when nothing else works. You sip, grimacing at the bitterness shorn of sugar, and wonder if a spoonful of that dragon's bone powder might liven the flavor. Historians still argue whether such powdered curios, grinding fossilized bone into medicine, offered any real benefit or merely fancy placebo. Tonight, Placebos are your allies. You drop the mug and pull a leather-bound journal toward you. Its cover is stamped with the city seal and your scrawled name. Inside, the pages overflow with crammed script, patient names, treatment notes, and the rhythm of death counts you log by flickering candlelight. You flip to today's entries, reading each line as if it were a funeral dirge. Bubonic cases, 27. Septic cases, 12. Deaths, 18. Survivors, 4. Each number pulses at you, a tribal drum marking time's march. You cock your head, try to find pride in the survivors, but the weight of losses crushes your chest. Fringe scholars once suggested turning these ledgers into poetic elegies, mindful memoirs to comfort the bereaved, but you doubt you have poetic heart left. Joke number 2, elegy by doctor. Coming soon, to a plague market near you. A low groan escapes you as you sit back, rubbing your temples. The heart's glow now feels harsh, illuminating every line of fatigue on your face. You consider venturing out for fresh air, just a moment beyond the door to taste night wind, but trepidation pins you to the car. You ponder, duty or despair. Historians still debate whether such quarantines protected doctors or merely isolated them in needless suffering. But here, solitude feels like both shield and cage. Your eyes drift to a small mirror cracked at the corner. You prop it against the wall and peer at yourselves. A ghost in threadbare garments, beard rough with day's growth, eyes ringed with sleepless sorrow. You raise a hand and trace a line on your cheek, as if testing whether you're flesh or phantom. Look at you, you murmur, voice thick. Survivor or specter? A laugh, hollow and jagged, escapes you. Joke number 3. Room for one more ghost story, starring yours truly. The silence presses closer as you close the journal. You rise, boots creaking as you slip them back on, determined to test your strength. You cross to the window, peel back a tattered curtain, and slip outside onto the narrow ledge. The moon hangs low, silver and indifferent, illuminating the empty street below. Lantern light flickers at distant windows, but here there's only calm. You lean against the sill, feeling the tremor in your legs, sign of fatigue or fear, you can't tell. You taste vinegar and ash on the air and remember the pest house iron doors. You shudder, recalling Marty's daughter's sobs echoing in that vast stone hall. Turning away, you return inside and move to the table where your flask of vinegar stands next to a jar of hyssop oil. You uncork the vinegar and inhale deeply, the sharp scent curling your nostrils. You splash a few drops onto your linen sleeve, an antiseptic ritual you perform even in solitude. Mainstream fact: vinegar's acidity was prized for cleansing wounds and surfaces, believed to kill miasma on contact. Yet here, it only cleanses your hairs. Your mind remains stained with memories. You tuck the flask back and hover over the jar of hyssop. The herb's sweet, minty aroma offers a momentary reprieve from the rancid city scents. You lift the sprig, twirl it between your fingers, and press its leaves to your lips. The fragrance fills your mouth, bright, fragrant to fight. For a moment, you imagine fields of herbs swaying under summer sun, far from rat-infested alleys and moldering bodies. Historians still argue whether hyssop's antiseptic properties truly curb contagion or merely freshen rooms. Tonight, it anchors you. You sit back on the cot and close your eyes, letting the herb's aroma weave through your thoughts. You recall the council room where sanitation won out over cockfights, where order triumphed over chaos. That victory feels distant now, nestled among the ledger's numbing figures. Yet you inhale hyssop again, stern, refreshing, and vow to carry that spark forward. Perhaps tomorrow you'll venture out into the dawn, broom in hand, to sweep away filth as you once decreed in candlelit debate. The hearth crackles, and you notice the last log blackening. You rise, feed at another piece of wood, and the blaze leaps back to life. Its warmth chases shadows in the corners, but the chill persists in your bones. You lock the cool tighter, resolve folding about you like armor. You will endure this solitude, if only to prove that the plague cannot extinguish a lone spark of hope. You lay back, dagger-eyed with determination and exhaustion intertwined. The moonlight shifts, painting the ceiling with ghostly patterns that dance in time with the heart's glow. Your journal lies open on the table, a promise of tomorrow's entries, notes of sanitation rounds, hybrid remedies blending vinegar and garlic, perhaps even trials of that dragon's bone powder. You close your eyes and whisper to the empty room, duty over despair. The words echo softly, buoyed by the crackling fire. You feel the quilt's weight ease, the herb's scent linger, and the log's warmth cradle you. Here, in this solitary refuge, you find a fragile peace, a moment's surrender to rest before the next day's battle. You step back into the courtyard, lantern held aloft, and find a makeshift office where records of death tolls are kept. Rows of parchments pinned to a rough wooden board, each sheet fluttering like a wounded bird in the damp night air. You probably won't survive tallying every lost soul, but here you stand as both witness and scribe to humanity's darkest ledger. A clerk in ink-stained robes weighs you over, his quill poised above a fresh sheet. Doctor, he hisses, voice hoarse, the latest figures. You nod, dipping your lantern's glow over the board. Mainstream fact, plague record-keeping became alarmingly systematic during Black Death outbreaks, as officials sought to gauge the epidemic's reach and resource needs. Columns list parish names, case counts, and deaths, numbers rising like tide. You smooth your cloak against the cold stone and prepare to record. The clerk hands you a tally stick card from out. On it, notches mark increments of 10 deaths, each notch your life extinguished. You clasp the stick and feel its weight, a canny reminder that every mark matters. Fringe rumor insists that some scribes carved extra notches to secure more alms for their parishes, though no one dares accuse them openly. You examine the stick's surface, 30 notches for your district alone. You add 3 more, the wood groaning under the new cuts. Joke number 1. These days are developing more rings than a welter of pub brawls. Beside you stands a candle-drenched ledger bound in stiff gold leather. You flip it open to today's page, where your neat script records 27 new bubonic cases and 12 septic. You dip your quill in ink and add the day's 18 deaths. The quill hesitates at the margin. Should you note survivors as triumphs or bury them amid losses? You decide to record them, for survivors earn a modest footnote. Historians still debate whether emphasizing survival rates provided solace or if such figures risked optimism that bred recklessness. Here, a line or two can shift morale as much as a lancet's edge. A low whistle draws your gaze to a second clerk who stands tapping a copper plate, transcribing numbers onto a chart for town council review. You peer at the sheet. Death tallies charted against waste collection schedules reveal a curious pattern. Parishes that increased refuse removal saw slight dips in mortality over the past week. Fringe analysts claim these correlations prove sanitation's secret star role, though skeptics chalk the dips to chance or seasonal shifts. You tap your quill on the ledger, murmuring, numbers don't lie, but people do. Joke number 2. Gas sanitation is the new black. The clerk gestures toward a faded map affixed nearby, showing parish boundaries painted in chalk. Each parish's shading deepens as death counts grow. You lean in, noting your district's hue, a grim charcoal, rivaled only by the merchant quarter. In a margin, someone scrawled a map's silhouette, an uncredited annotation echoing the whispered graffiti you found weeks ago. Historians still argue whether such unofficial notes influence policy or dismissed as idle doodles. But here, that rat reminds you of the vectors you chased in narrow lanes. You step to a small table bearing a bowl of dark liquid, used to wet quills and also rumored to double as a grim potion for miasma sufferers. The clerk encourages you to do it, but you resist. Too many times have you scrubbed ink and blood from your hands. Instead, you rinse your fingers in a basin of vinegar and water, swirling them until the scent burns your skin. Mainstream fact: vinegar was indeed used to cleanse surfaces and instruments amid outbreaks, thought to kill contagion on contact. You offer a wide grin at the irony of cleansing away work meant for ink's permanence. A faint scratching draws your attention to the ledger's bottom corner. You crouch to inspect a marginal note. Fever cases spike near the old tannery, suggesting increased line. The handwriting is shaky but earnest. You make a mental note to visit that quarter tomorrow, lime in hand. Historians still debate whether such granular notes drove practical interventions or lost amid bureaucratic deluge. But you value every local tip that hints at a cure. Suddenly, the candle guttering next to the quart vial of plague anecdotes shakes. That jar contains collected confidences, villagers' whispered remedies, half-forgotten cures, and scraps of folk wisdom. You open it, withdrawing a slip of parchment. Apple cider wines boiled with elderflowers cure grandpa's coughs. You tuck the note into your pocket. One more fringe lead a test. You also retrieve another. Rosemary garlands kept death at bay. A set you recall offering fleeting comfort in the sick ward. Each fragment teases possibility amid despair. The clerk pauses, clearing his throat. Doctor, the council awaits this tallyador. We must finalize numbers. You stand, gathering your tools and ledgers. You glance at the board one last time. Towering piles of figures, each one a testament to lives lived and lost. You feel the gravity settle in your chest, knowing that tomorrow, these numbers become decisions. Where to allocate clean water, where to station nurses, where to deploy your battered tools once more. You step away. Lanterns glow, illuminating the ledger's margins. You think of the chef's chicken, the garlic charms, the beetle paste, all converging in these simple tallies. Behind you, the clerks shuffle papers. Before you, the darkened street beckons. You lift the tally stick, examining its fresh notches as if they bear stories begging to be told. You whisper, numbers are souls, not statistics. The stick taps softly against the ledger's cover. As you depart, you cast a glance at the council's chart, resolve stealing your spine. Tomorrow, you'll follow leads born of data, lime for tanners, sanitation mounds for merchants, hyssop for fearful hearts. For every notch you carve, you owe life your best effort, and you will not let the tally mark be the final tribute. You step into the silent courtyard, the tally he stick now a heavy talisman in your hand. Lantern swinging, you walk toward the street, determined that each figure you record will guide your next act of care. Because in this plague's ledger, your choices matter as much as your stains of ink. You stepped into the pale light of dawn, the sky washed in bruised purples and muted golds, as torches gutter to embers behind you. Another endless night survived, yet salvation feels as distant as the horizon. You probably won't survive another day of this, and frankly, modern you wouldn't last an hour on these streets. But here you stand, lantern still clasped in one hand, tally stick and ledger in the other, surveying the silent city that seems paused between breath and decay. Street corners bristle with morning frost, speckled by hoofprints and straw from yesterday's chaos. You pause at the entrance to St. Ovid's Lane, where you once penned discoveries about Raffleet vectors. Mainstream fact: the Black Death's second wave in 1361 recurred after a brief lull, proving the hope's reprieve was often only a temporary calm before the storm. You catch your reflection, pale, haunted eyes beneath a dirt-caked brow, and wonder if that brief calm might be granted to you, but you know it won't. Ahead, market stalls lie vacant save for a shattered wooden table where a single fishmonger's board remains, splintered and soaked in yesterday's blood and vinegar. You kneel, brushing frost from the board, remembering the man you treated who offered you that same fish pot in payment. Fringe tidbit. Some survivors believe that carrying a fish bone in one's pocket could harness the fish's regenerative powers, though no one recalls a single testimonial of this bone magic working any miracle other than using a curious law. You tuck a tiny shard into your pocket, a silent talisman of absurdity. Historians still argue whether communal memory of plagues horrors shaped European public health for centuries or whether these lessons vanished like ashes in the wind. But as you stand here alone, the weight of collective memory presses on your shoulders. You lift your ledger, pages fluttering in the cold breeze, each line scrawled in quill ink more visceral than any portrait. Names, ages, symptoms, outcomes. You trace a finger over a name you remember well. Marta, bubo under her arm the size of an orange. Her final entry, a jagged flourish. You whisper her name, offering a silent benediction. You rise and walk toward the pest house gates, now painted bright by dawn's early light, a cruel contrast to the iron misery of yesterday. Mainstream fact, quarantine houses or pest houses were used sporadically after the Black Death, though overcrowding often negated their intended isolation. You slide the ledger into your satchel and push open the gate, the hinges groaning in protest. Inside, a single lantern still burns low in memory of the souls you counted here. A tattered banner above the doorway reads, "Once more, hope through order," though now its letters hang by frayed threads. You step inside, boots crunching on straw, and feel the hush swell around you like a prayer. Bedposts stand empty. Straw beds lie undisturbed since the night before. You recall the 3 jokes you managed in that vast hall, light as lantern sparks flickering in blackness. Yet laughter feels almost sacrilegious here. You bow your head in a moment of reverence for the dead and for the living who dared to sit by their sides. Historians still debate whether such personal acts of compassion alleviated suffering or simply amplified the tragedy. But for you, each vigil was its own redemption. Emerging again into the chill, you make your way to the council's decreed sanitation post, where a single sweep of broom lingers against drifts of refuse. The street smells faintly of burned wood and fresh lime, an olfactory echo of the decree you helped pass. You sweep absent-mindedly at stray leaves, each stroke a reminder that cleaning isn't just labor, but a gesture of defiance against entropy. Joke number 1, Broom and Board, my next best-selling memoir. You cross the plaza toward the apothecary shop, a squat stone building with fractured shutters and a solitary flower pot of lavender by the door. The apothecary emerges, rubbing his hands against his apron. He nods at you, offering a vial of distilled hyssop oil, a concession from our earlier debates. You inhale its sweet, minty fragrance, feeling the herb's warmth seep in the chilled bones. Fringe rumor holds that hyssop saved the clubfoot baker's life, inexplicably leaping him to perfect health, though no one trusted that tale beyond the tavern table. You smile, tucking the vial into an inner pocket, another odd relic of this day. Turning away, you climb the steps toward your lodging, each stone echoing with footsteps from countless others who trudged here, weary as you. You pause midway, looking back at the labyrinth of alleys you've navigated, the mortuary streets, the miasma-ridden lanes, the council chambers. You lengthen your stride, summoning a final burst of resolve. You survived one more sunrise, but as history attests, dawn offers no true victory, only the promise of another struggle. You stand beneath the archway of your doorway, shoulders squared against the morning chill. Your tools rest easy at your side, worn companions that bear stories both gruesome and hopeful. You close your eyes, tasting iron and hyssop on the breeze. Modern you might collapse at the first cough, but here, forged in a day of terror and tenacity, you stand as proof that a single soul's endurance can leave a mark on history's ledger. You take a deep breath, then exhale slowly, One day down, you murmur, and maybe, just maybe, we cheated death again. Now, the world softens as your heartbeat slows. The sky, once streaked with violence and dust, melts into tender pastels, the colors of quiet comfort more than calamity. Each breath you take draws in that gentle light, a balm for lungs still haunted by musty straw and smoldering embers. Let your shoulders unclench. The tally stick rests at your side, no longer a burden, but a reminder that you did all you could. Feel the weight of exhaustion cradle you, a warm whisper lulling eyes heavy with memories. The scent of hyssop and chamomile drifts from a nearby cup, your final offering to weary senses. Let clasp your mind, guiding thoughts away from the pest house iron gates and toward a meadow's soft grass, where bees hum, not of disease, but of unbroken summer days. Recall only kindness now, the child's laugh over a wooden die, the baker's gratitude for a blood-smeared bandage, the student's amazed gaze at his own sketches. These moments flicker like fireflies in dusk, tiny points of grace that defy the plague's dark tide. Allow them to shine in your mind until sleep's veil draws you into gentle nothingness. There's no need for final victories tonight. The city sleeps, its groans softened by cool air and shadowed eaves. Tomorrow, you'll rise to new trials, but for now, surrender to calm. Let every worry drift away, carried on the soft hum of a distant fan or the faint rustle of curtains in a sleeping room. Close your eyes and imagine your heartbeat matching the hush of a field at dawn. You're safe here in this moment between days. The plague's roar fades to a whisper. You, too, become a quiet echo of hope.